I would say the standard commission used to be 6%, 3% to the seller, 3% to the buyer. Then there was this big realtor lawsuit about a year ago. So now today, no fees being advertised to the buyer's agents. But what I see is most of the sellers still are offering some type of fee. Usually I see 2%, 2.5%. Are you seeing that up and across?
I mean, it's usually 2 to 3%, and that's what you were seeing before the settlement. The settlement really has just added another layer to agents to have to ask the question, how much is your landlord or your seller offering?
Welcome to Silberman Realty's Property Desk Podcast, Episode 6, where we talk all things residential real estate in Texas. Today is October 21st, 2025, and I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the company and your host. I'm joined by my co-host, Robert Vernon, who is
Hey, guys.
Hey, Robert, who's a real estate agent with Silberman Realty. Robert, just give me a gut feel here. DFW,
Okay.
DFW market, is it a buyer's market, seller's market, or balanced?
I would say right now we are still in a buyer's market. Could change soon, but as things sit today, I would still say the buyers have the upper hand.
Yeah. Sellers still want a lot for their stuff.
Yeah, they're not willing to give it away. They see the headlines, the rate cuts are coming soon. Unless they are very desperate to get out of their home, a lot of them are willing to wait it out.
Okay. And then switching gears on you, going over to the lease market, how hard is it to get stuff leased in tech? Because you lease all over for us. You lease Austin, Houston, Dallas.
do.
How hard is it to get stuff leased?
Really depends on the market. Right now, Austin has been the most challenging of all our markets to try to lease. Probably have the most inventory right there. Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio have been pretty steady. I'd say it's not at industry norms levels right now, but we are able to get things leased. It is a little bit more of a challenge. The client pool is a little bit lower as a whole than what you're used to seeing. But I would say those markets are doing better than Austin. Austin is pretty much the what they call the redheaded stepchild of Texas right now.
Not a good time to be a landlord in Austin, I'm afraid. Yeah. That could change, and it could change. Things could get worse in Houston and DFW. That just changes according to the market.
Yeah, Austin was going to naturally be the hardest one hit. It had the biggest run up, but they've been hit with economic challenges there too that have really put some downward pressure on the leasing and the sales volume there.
Okay. And today we have to answer questions. So we're answering real estate questions today, people's questions, general questions, and talking about leasing. That's a nice segue into this first question is, how long does it take to lease a house on average in Texas? Well, I guess a long time, if ever, in Austin, right? But
some of our landlords would tell you it feels like it's taken them an eternity, and it is. Sometimes you can't price the house down far enough to get the activity you need. We're seeing that in some parts of Austin, especially the suburbs. I would say on average right now, it's going to take you about a month or two. If you're priced competitively, your house is in good shape, you don't have weeds growing out everywhere and unkept bushes, mismatching paint. If you make sure your house is in good leaseable condition, you should be able to get that house leased within 1 or 2 months right now, given the time of year that we're in.
Okay, so it is dependent on the year. Generally speaking, you're going in fall, holidays. That's the slowest time to do a lease. Are you still, go ahead.
I was going to say, but like this past summer, we actually noticed it was a lot slower than most years. I've been doing leasing now for almost 15 years. It was definitely the slowest busy season. And that's not making the slower season more slow. It's just we have way more inventory. And so with that much inventory on the market, as a landlord, you cannot get away with the little things that you used to. Sure. You have got to make sure your house is in good condition. Otherwise, there's 15 other houses within a mile radius that they can choose from that most likely will.
I sit in an ivory tower a little bit from my view, but I was always under the assumption that it takes, on average, if you price it right, 30 days to lease a house. But maybe that's true.
In a normal market, yes, but we have a lot more inventory than we usually do right now. And so that we've noticed that trend has gone up a little bit.
So when you're leasing a house, if you were to lease a house in the next 10 or 15 days, obviously, and you're in a slow season, that means if you do a 12-month lease, that lease is going to expire in the holidays next year. Will you try to get an extra 2 or 3 months so maybe that lease comes up in January? Do we still try to do that?
Not 2 or 3 months, more like right now, we're doing an extra 5 to 6 months. You want to get into that spring season. If you actually would rather have it come available in October than you would in
Oh, really?
January. Because right when you get past the holidays, people are already back in the swing of things again. People have taxes due. A lot of people have first, like, top of the year things that they have to deal with. It does slow down between January and the spring. Usually about spring break is when things start to pick up.
Mhm.
And ideally, we'd like to have the leases in between April and the end of May if we can.
Of course,
And so we try to wrap the leases when we
and of
can.
course, the
So
tenants may give you some pushback because they typically want a year lease. They may not want to do 15, 16 months.
usually, but if they have children that are school aged, it usually works in their favor to have their lease end at the end of the school season, which is May. So it works out for both. Your kids aren't having to worry about being moved in the middle of a school season, and then the landlord gets their house back at a more profitable time for them in the year.
Okay.
So it ends up being a win-win. We do a lot of leases that wrap around 18 months, 16 months to try to hit that window. And it's not a perfect size. Not everybody wants it, but you always offer it. And a lot of times people do take it more times than not.
Okay. Very good. All right, let's move on to our next question. So, this one is, how much does it cost to sell a home in Texas? If you'd asked me this maybe a year or two ago, I just would have said 6%.
And I think a lot of people think it's just that standard, oh, it's the 6% commission. But there's a lot more that goes into that question, really, than just the commission. You've got taxes that have to be paid, HOA resale certificates. Hey, you got some staging costs that might come in, some repairs. So if you really want to take everything into account, it can really come up to about like 9 to 10% of the cost when you average all of your expenses. And a lot of people just think, oh, I've just paid the 6% commission, but you really do have more costs associated with it whenever you are selling.
Yeah, for certain, there's incidental costs and that. I mean, if we're just narrow this question down to how much are the realtor commissions, I would say the standard commission used to be 6%, 3% to the seller, 3% to the buyer. Then there was this big realtor lawsuit about a year ago, and there was a settlement. And the idea was that the selling agents were colluding with the buyer's agents, and these 3% buyer fees were basically anti-competitive fees being charged. So now today, no fees being advertised to the buyer's agents. But what I see is most of the sellers still are offering some type of fee. Usually I see 2%, 2.5%. Are you seeing that up and across?
I mean, it's usually 2 to 3%, and that's what you were seeing before the settlement. The settlement really has just added another layer to agents to have to ask the question, how much is your landlord or your seller offering in commit to try to formulate your offer. And a lot of times you're using that in your negotiations as well.
Mhm.
But I'd say the standard is still going to be somewhere between that 4.5 to 6% to sell your house. And feel free to check our website. We do have seller programs on there that you can look at. We do offer 3 different types of tiers if you are looking to sell your house. And so you might be able to save a little bit of money
Mhm.
by going through us.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And not just us. Yeah, for certain, we want the business, come to us. But don't forget that, and this was a taboo thing among realtors, but it's recently probably still taboo, but there are what they used to call discount brokers. I think that name has a negative connotation, so they don't like to call themselves that anymore. But when I started in the business 20 years ago, it was the dirty little secret of a discount broker where you'd pay them a flat fee, like $600, $1,000 or something like that to put their house on the MLS. And now, they essentially still exist. It's just a little bit more sophisticated. The way we do it is we offer different programs where they can, more like an a la carte kind of thing. They can get a flat fee or a lower fee depending upon the services that they need. So if you're a seller that has some experience in that kind of stuff, has sold or bought homes previously, and you think you don't need as much of a service, then by all means check out some of these lower cost services, and you can put a little bit more of the legwork yourself. And on an expensive home, on $1 million home, $2 million home, whatever, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And if you've got savviness or you've worked with this stuff before in the past, allow us just to do the part that you can't do and save yourself
Yep.
some money.
Okay, how about this one? How long does it usually take to sell a home in Texas?
Oh, wow. That depends on the seller. So it depends on what their motivation is and the neighborhood. That question's a difficult one because the nicer, most The prettiest girl on the block type homes are going to be the ones that are going to go fast all the time. If you're looking for a regular run of the mill cookie cutter home in a neighborhood where you've got 50 of the same stamped house, those are going to be very difficult to sell right now. That could be upwards to 6 months, even longer. It is a very competitive market for that type of home. So I would say it just depends on where it's located, what kind of upgrades you have in the home. For instance, if this house has been a rental property for 6 or 7 years, that's going to show some wear and tear from lots of different types of renters. That type of home is going to take much longer to sell if it is not priced appropriately. So it's more important than ever to make sure that your house is priced appropriately, because the buyer pool is much lower now than it has been in several years.
To me, it's still 90% price. I feel like if you price a house and you let it be on the market for 30 days, you should be under contract within 30 days. And then from there, if the buyer is financed, then maybe it takes another 30, 45 days to close for the lender to get all their stuff together. So you should, from the day you list a house priced correctly, you should be able to get to a closing somewhere in 45 to 60 days. That would be the most efficient scenario. Now,
that would be your most ideal situation right now, I would say. Yeah.
Now, that's not the way it works, Robert, because Robert knows this because he's dealing with sellers who are real people. They don't always price their houses.
No, and it's been difficult with the price discovery we have. There's some areas that have been hit harder than others, and every seller sees it that way. They know what house what they want. They know what Zillow's telling them their price is worth. It's not always accurate. They see several of their homes on the market for a certain price, but even though they're not selling, they still want to be within that same price range. And so it just depends on the seller's attitude, the seller's need, how fast something can really sell.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that. If I could give an example going back, say if you're looking at different markets right now, I saw some TikTok. This isn't necessarily Texas, but this was 30A. If you ever go over to Destin, Robert, or those kinds of places for beach vacations, there was some social media banter about how just oversupplied all those rental beach houses are, not just on the beach, but in that area. And if you're selling something right now, trying to sell a vacation rental over in Florida where all the water's blue near Destin, you're going to have a lot of competition. Or if you're in DFW, right, in North Dallas, like we talked about Prosper, or Austin, where things were crazy. Yeah, you had a big run. If you're selling a home and there's a ton of inventory on the market and you're trying to get prices that are similar to what things were going for a year or two ago, that's a tough road to hoe.
Not only just that, you could still be priced right, but if your house doesn't have all the repairs and the upgrades and things that are needed, and you're competing with 30 other in the same neighborhood, for instance, neighborhood Providence Village, north part of Dallas, most of those homes are for sale or for lease, and the entire, good luck standing out when they were all built within the past 10 years. They all look the same.
Hard to do.
Yeah, it's rough. It is rough there.
All right, next question. How much does property management cost in Texas? We just had this discussion, I think, at our meeting a week or two ago. I'll just take this one, but
Sure.
What I saw, and I did a data report on it, I saw at least in the short answer, 6 to 10% is what most people charge. In DFW, for whatever reason, 8% of the total rent seemed to be the magic number. There are flat fee companies out there, 80, 90, $100. We currently charge $100 per month. We're thinking about going up to $150 on new properties that we take on, just because we haven't had a price increase in 10 or
15 years.
We've been doing some amazing things with AI and outsourcing offshore stuff and keeping prices low. But yeah, at some point it becomes unsustainable not to have a price increase. We definitely are some of the lower cost ones on.
Yeah, you go find any business that hasn't had a price increase in 15 years. It'd be really hard to find very many of.
I'm proud of that. That's what's sacred. If you ever go into Costco, does Costco still charge $1.50 for the hot dog?
$1.50 hot dog.
That is sacred at Costco. They've got to be losing money on the $1.50.
They lose money on that and their rotisserie chicken. It's the same thing. They just want to get you in the door.
There's some really cool social media stuff about old men buying chickens at Costco.
Yes, okay.
8% is pretty typical. $100 a month, $150, whatever. That's the monthly property management services. There's a lease cost to that. What's the lease? What is, I don't even, I know what we charge for lease fees. What do you know what other people charge for lease fees right now all over Texas?
Lease fees anywhere from 75% to 100%. I think if you're charging anything less than that, you're having a hard time getting
Right. Of the
quality applicants.
75 to
So-
100% of the first month's rent.
Of the first month's rent only,
Okay.
correct.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
And then you have to offer, this is how the sausage is made to go along with the hot dog thing more longer. But it's, if you charge over 100% of 1 month's rent, if there's a realtor that represents the tenant, then sometimes you pay that tenant rep 50%, 20%, 30%, something like that. That's market dependent as well. All right. What services do property managers typically offer? So what do you want to take a stab at that one? Just give the laundry list of what managers do.
Oh yeah. Essentially, we're going to give you rent collection. We're going to keep up with your profit and loss throughout the year. Give you a nice little tax statement at the end of the year with your profit and losses, so you don't have to keep up with it all year long. We're going to vet your tenants out, make sure that they aren't fraud, write you a lease that's with this new standard language that's being used by the Texas Real Estate Board, take in repair requests.
Years ago, I think I did all the sales for one property management company that I started, and then I started another one. And I had this down to a science when I would have the sales pitch. I don't know if I can still remember what I would say, but I'd say, okay, yeah, we offer full service property management. And that means that we'll do all your repair requests and repair coordination. We'll do all the rent collections at the end of the year. We'll do your financial statements, and we'll do your tax statements. That includes your 1099 end of year statement. It includes your preparing your income statement, preparing your balance sheet, cash flow statement. So yeah, it's full service property management. And then the follow-up questions I'd always get, okay, and this one would always surprise me. Not everyone would ask this, but oh, does that mean you pay for the repair request? And I'm like, no, that's
I do get that sometimes from landlords, and I have to make it very clear. We coordinate it. It's not that we pay for it. I thought there was this one that asked me, I thought you were going to pay for getting yard mowed in between. I said, well, you think I could afford to do that?
Right. And yes, it is a silly question because you're paying, in this case, you're paying $100 a month. How are we going to pay for all your repair requests if we're only charging you $100 a month? I mean,
and I think people put two and two together until sometimes you just have to make them understand that. And they usually do, but a lot of people are new to it. They're new landlords. They don't really know. They hear stories about, I just get a house, I'll get a property manager, they take care of it. And that's all they know. Yeah. And so you have to really educate them on what that entails.
The other question,
but I think the main thing people like is that we hear the sob stories. Yeah. We hear all the complaining. They don't want that. Landlords don't want to hear that because they got a soft spot. Yeah. And they need someone like a bulldog that's going to be willing to tell them.
Or just a callous, heartless person like people we employ at Silverman Realty. So
they're great people.
It's not going to succumb to the tenant stories on Christmas Eve of not being able to pay rent. Correct. Hey, the truth about that is, as a landlord, you are paying for that go-between, that firewall, right? Yes. So that way there's a disconnect. It's you can't say, oh, give me a break on rent. Say, look, I'm the property manager. I offer professional service. It's the same service for everybody. If you don't pay rent, you have to get out. Okay. There is value to that. And that's the same thing with me. I'm also a lawyer. It's a lot easier for lawyers to negotiate settlement agreements than it is the principal, because as a lawyer, I can play it off. Oh man, my guy's really tough. He just doesn't have a lot of money right now. Let me see if I can get this deal done. And I can act like the good cop and then go back to my client and some of that. So there's all kinds of psychology with it. Right. All right. Yeah. Those were services property managers offer. I'm trying to think if there was another one that we get. We talk about some people think you get repaired. Oh, here's one more before we move on to the next question. Let's see, what was it? The services property managers offer coordination over, do you pay for, you pay bills. Okay. What bills do you pay? And for single family property management, it's not like we're managing a whole strip center or an office building. If we were, the companies out there that do that, yes, they are going to pay the utility bills. They're going to pay maybe the mortgage. Single family property managers, we're not going to pay the mortgage for you. We're not going to pay insurance. We're not going to pay utility bills. The tenant pays the utility bills mostly, but if there's turnover, then the landlord is going to cover that in between. And that's just sort of product of the industry. So yeah, usually we're not paying bills unless it's a repair request bill, like a plumber goes out there, we will pay that.
I do know some property management companies will turn utilities on for you in between tenants. And I know that's one question that we get asked a whole lot. However, you're usually going to be paying a lot more for those types of property management services that have that built in with
Yeah,
them. It's a
we've
lot,
never
it's a lot
we've
harder.
never been able to crack that nut. I can't figure out how to efficiently turn on utilities or electric for a property for 1 month. And I wish there was a service out there that said, okay, property management company, you can have some general account and you can roll properties on and off this account. And then we could somehow conveniently just pass that cost along to the landlords. But as far as I know, it
And
doesn't
if
exist.
everybody used TSU, well, if everybody was deregulated that we managed, it would make it easy.
Yeah.
But we don't. We have some that have these special utility districts, and they require it to be in the landlord's name, or you get transfers over, and it's not a one size fits all. And when we're the size that we are,
Yeah.
that's too hard for
Yeah, you
us.
just can't.
to
You
manage
just
that.
logistically, you just can't deal with 100 electric providers across the state of Texas or whatever. But or
Yeah.
even water companies. So it's just crazy. Let's switch gears over to the next question. This one's about selling a home. What do I have to disclose when selling a home? You want to take a crack at that one, Robert?
Okay, so yeah, so you'll have your seller disclosure that you have to fill out. And within there, you have to put any material repairs that you've done over the property, any known defects that you know of right now have to be disclosed. If they're not, that can become a problem for you as a seller down the line, even after you close on the property, if it's discovered that you would have known something. Other things that you have to disclose, if there's like liens on the property currently, any back taxes would have to be disclosed. If there's a death on the property, not all types of deaths, but if there's like a crime related death or a death due to a problem with the property, that must be disclosed as well.
Okay.
Anything
I
else?
want to focus on repairs because I think generally speaking, you don't have to disclose previous repairs if the stuff has actually been repaired. There are some kind of minor exceptions to that. And I pulled up the state promulgated seller's disclosure form. There's actually two of them. There's the one that the realtors put out, which is more onerous on the sellers. And then there's the state one that's in the code, basically in the property code. And at least going off the less onerous one, there was like previous structural repairs or roof repairs. So maybe if you had a foundation repaired or I guess a roof repaired, then they would want you to disclose that. So that's a little,
Yeah, you have to disclose any of the major
yeah,
repairs, affect the insurance.
but you don't want to, if you like, I don't know, had a door fall off its hinges, you don't have to disclose all of that going out. If you lived in the house 10 years out of the little small,
I guess let's change it. It has to be structural integrity of the
yeah, that's
property.
probably,
If it's a repair that changed or fixed the structural integrity of the property, you would have to disclose.
yeah, that's
that.
probably a good rule of thumb. And I think the
Yeah.
default here is when you're selling a house, Robert, you give your clients a seller's disclosure. It's probably the realtor form. And it's gonna,
Yes.
you're gonna check all this stuff. Does the house have water? Does the house have a gas furnace or electric furnace? Does it have smoke alarms? All those kinds of, you have this laundry list of stuff, but generally they're looking for major structural repairs, any previous water penetration, flooding onto the property, any additions to the property. That is a major stuff that you're going to disclose. Yeah.
Yeah. And if there's something that comes up that you didn't know about that was done prior to you owning the home and you were never aware of that situation and it came up later after you sold the home, that would be a situation that would be where you wouldn't be in trouble for not disclosing something because you didn't actually know that happened. I had that happen on it before.
And the seller's, what Robert's saying is, and this is the way I would characterize it, is the seller's disclosure is about what you as the seller have knowledge of. So if you
Right.
if you didn't know something, then you can't be expected to disclose it. And as in the law firm side of things, in my law firm, this is a real estate podcast, not the law firm podcast, but we see a lot of failure to disclose things. And if you're a buyer trying to sue a seller, it's really hard to prove what a seller knew and didn't disclose because it's difficult to prove what's in the mind of that seller. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. This one I'll ask more legal related as an attorney. I'll tackle it. How to read a title commitment. But before I do that, does your real estate clients ever ask you about the title commitment, Robert?
I just want to know when it's in, just to know that it came in and that there's nothing on Schedule C.
Okay.
Schedule C is basically the main part of that disclosure that is going to make or break a deal. And if there's nothing that shows up on Schedule C, then we just move on to the next part usually.
Okay. And if your clients ever ask you a bunch of detail about title commitments, the answer should be, hey, you need to go seek the counsel of a lawyer. But yeah, Robert is 100% right on track. The main thing is Schedule C. That's where all the problems. If you were to run down as like Schedule A, like basic stuff, who record title currently is held in and who the name of the person that the policy is going to insure. Schedule B is standard stuff that the title company is not going to insure. And then Schedule C is where the stuff we care about. So if you're a buyer out there and you're looking at a title commitment, go to Schedule C, read the items in Schedule C. Ask yourself, is there anything that looks like it would be hard for the seller to clear for me to close on this house? And if you start seeing stuff like there's a bunch of liens on the property, that's where you probably need to hire an attorney to figure out, does this thing have a chance of closing? And if you're a seller and you get Schedule C back and you don't know all this stuff, you probably do need to hire an attorney to help clear this stuff. But yeah. So title commitments, good stuff. I think a lot of buyers just don't care. I get the sense. Do you agree, Robert, that they just, hey, my title commitment's in. Does that mean I'm going to close?
They don't want to understand what it is until we tell them, and they don't really care usually unless there is an issue that pops up. Biggest issues that I see that come up in those types of situations is in Texas is when people do the quit claim deed. When you change a property over a quit claim deed, it's very difficult to get that property to clear for a general warranty deed for the new buyer, because it requires everybody who's ever had a party to that property to sign off on the sale. And it's usually hard to do when there's a quit claim deed.
No, you're right. I'm surprised you tried to sell a house or buy a house one time when there was a quit claim deed in the chain of title.
Yes. Yeah, it was it's impossible.
Yeah, we do that work at the law firm a lot. And a quit claim deed will pass title in Texas. It just creates a problem for insurable title. So you have to go back and get that quit claim deed replaced and re-signed with a warranty.
It can really delay your closing a lot because there's a lot that can go into it. I've had a closing get delayed almost 6 months.
You were lucky to get it closed. Sometimes if you had a quit claim deed signed 25 years ago, 50 years ago, and
you're done,
nobody can sign it, it's hard to go back and replace that. Now, at some point, you can get title insurance and they just on kind of an adverse possession type of thing, but that's not, you don't want to be going down that road, but we digress. All right, this one, I think squarely you can tackle, Robert. How much do I need for a down payment? So for a house?
Well, it depends. Did you serve in the military? Then you don't need anything.
VA loan, right?
That's a VA loan. So it just depends on what type of loan you're going after. If you're a first-time home buyer, usually you're going after an FHA loan. They offer a little bit more competitive rates, and you're going to put 3.5% down. But you're going to pay PMI, which is mortgage protection insurance. It's going to raise your monthly premiums. If you can put down 20%, you'll get a conventional loan. You'll have the best favorable terms. You won't be paying any money to mortgage protection insurance. It's just basically throwing your money away each month. That's the ideal way. And that's what sellers want to see come across their offers as well. They like to see 20% down conventional strong buyers. VA buyers, FHA buyers, there's nothing wrong with them whatsoever. The process is a little bit more strenuous. It can make the house go through a little bit more checks and balances than you would have on a conventional, has more potential for things to make the transaction hiccup. But they're all good programs. So like I said, VA, you can do as little as 0% down. FHA, you're about 3.5%. And then conventional, you can do anything from 5 to 20 to 99% if you choose. But you do have to have at least 20% equity down in your loan in order to avoid that mortgage protection insurance.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's about right. I think the only one we missed that I've heard of before is very rare is this USDA loan. It's the United States Department of Agriculture loan.
You don't see a lot of those.
No, I think I've only seen one or two and across my career, but it's 0% down in rural areas. I think there's income restrictions. Surprisingly, you can get to some suburban stuff approved too, but
yeah, it's not one I deal with very much.
That's a rare one. All right, this is a management one, and we have landlords ask us: can landlords approve or deny the tenants themselves? I think
absolutely.
Isn't that our policy?
Yeah.
You
It
Okay, tell us
is.
how you do that.
That's not every management company's process, but in our process, at the end of the day, this is your home as a landlord.
Sure.
You should have the final say who lives in it. I will vet out the applicant as much as I can. I will give you all the facts, but at the end of the day, the landlord makes the final decision.
Mhm.
A lot of times landlords like us to make that final decision because they consider us the expert in that space. When we do have that type of situation come, I do try to work with the landlord to make them feel comfortable about the applicant if it is somebody who they should feel comfortable about. But ultimately, the landlord, I think, should make the final decision on who
Yeah.
lives in their property.
And I think some of that is liability driven for us. We just don't want landlords saying, "Oh, well, you selected the tenant and the tenant didn't pay." It doesn't, so it's your fault. It doesn't really work like that. If you're offering a professional service, whether it's at my law firm or whether here for real estate, professionals make the best judgment calls we possibly can with the data provided. We're not in the insurance business. We're not guaranteeing the tenant's going to pay rent, but we will assist the landlord in making the most educated professional decision possible.
Right.
And that's really all you can do. But we want landlords to have input for certain. All right. And then the last question we've got, management one. Can the landlord find a tenant and have a management company still manage it? So what do you think, Robert?
Yes, we actually have that scenario quite often. Sometimes landlords feel like they want to take on the responsibility of finding the tenant, and it's perfectly fine. They do that. They approve them, they send them to us. We typically write them a lease agreement for a flat fee. And then we tailor it towards our management company. And then we take on the property for management. And we just manage it like normal. But the landlord definitely has the ability to find their own tenant if they feel like they have that, if they're good enough to do that.
Yeah. And now, what do we usually do? We usually charge them a fee for writing the lease or something. So if they found it, or
Yeah, it's a $250 fee to write
Right.
the lease, a flat fee.
as of the date of this recording, so we charge them something,
Correct.
and we put the lease together, and then that way, I don't know how the landlords find them. I guess they're out there putting them on Zillow themselves or something. I don't know.
You can anybody can go put a property on the internet on Zillow or apartments.com, but knowing what you're getting from the other end takes experience really. And a lot of times you can get fake stuff that looks real through. In fact, we get a lot of management signups for people who did just do that themselves and they got basically screwed over by the tenant. And so they were like, I can't do this. I realize this is harder than I thought. I need to get a management company to vet these out instead of me doing it on my own. Because anybody can get a lead all day long. I get leads all the time for properties, but it doesn't mean that they're qualified.
Now, will we screen, if the landlord finds a tenant, will we screen them as well or no?
Yes. Yeah. We will do the screening process as
Okay.
well as part of the lease writing.
Okay. But the tenant pays the app fees, we screen them, you make the recommendations
Correct.
to the landlord, and then we write the lease. So we charge them a smaller lease writing fee. Okay.
In that situation, I typically just run the background checks, get all the reports, give it to the landlord and let them review it and let them make the decision since they're doing their own.
Okay. Look, that was our last question for the day. So that's a wrap.
Awesome.
We closed up this show as
I think we got through quite a few good questions.
All right. I've been your host, Phil Silverman. Robert Vernon has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcast. And as a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice or investment advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a question about real estate or something you'd like us to cover, email us at info@silbermanrealty.com. That's info@silbermanrealty.com. Tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Everybody have a great day, rest of your week.
Have a good one.